Hey everyone, Seth here. Quick reminder, if you want to contact us with a question or comment or whatever, there are a couple ways you can do so. Either you can go to our email at more.layers.podcast@gmail.com, or you can go to YouTube, use the comment section below the videos, or a direct YouTube message is another way you can do that. And just feel free to give us any questions, comments, podcast topic suggestions, whatever, shout out, whatever, and we'll try to get back. Hey everyone, welcome. This is episode 60 of More Layers. I'm Seth Mariano.
I'm Jordan Smith, and before we start the official episode, Seth and I have a very exciting announcement because every year, as mentioned in previous episodes, we do a theater production, and in the spring, at some point, sometimes even in the winter, the reunion will be held for the cast so they can meet together, remember the times of the past show, and at the end, they'll announce what the next one is. Up until very recently, we had heard nothing about a reunion and we still weren't quite sure what the show could be. But as of earlier today, the official date has been announced, and we will see everybody on Star Wars Day, May 4th, actually, where we will finally learn what this year's show will be.
Yeah, we hadn't heard a word for such a long time. I'm sure a lot of people were waiting, but finally, yes, we finally have news that the date and time has been set. It'll be 2 p.m. May the 4th, Saturday. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it.
As am I. If for no other reason, I'm just really looking forward to seeing everybody again and the excitement they have when they run into each other. As I tell many people, this cast displays a kind of love that we don't see as much as we should in other parts of the world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we'll probably in a near future episode discuss that more. But for today, we're going to be starting off taking a look at some films that have been announced that are on the horizon. And there are quite a number of them. I had a few written down. Did you have a lot of them written down too?
Oh yeah, I wrote down a few. Most of them I was either at least looking forward to or intrigued. Some of them not as much, but this is more just what films are coming out as to what films I'll personally really want to watch. Some of them I will want to watch, but this is more just like a general list.
Yeah, what's on your list?
Well, starting off, the first film I wrote down is one that's actually coming out in about 3 days at the time this episode is being recorded, and that is the new Godzilla and Kong movie. I did not see the Godzilla versus Kong film, at least up to this point, although I may do that soon. But I know that it's connected to some of the more recent Godzilla films. And to avoid some confusion, I know some people know about the Godzilla minus one movie, which actually won Godzilla an Oscar for the first time. But right now, around here, it's going to be difficult to see because this movie's coming out and they want to avoid confusion. But from what I understand, the Godzilla versus Kong universe, if you want to call it that, is doing relatively well. So we'll see in a few days how this one does.
Yeah, I'm not that acquainted with like King Kong. I know like maybe the basic classic story, and I did ride the little 4D Skull Island ride when I was at Universal last May. So yeah, but that's about it for me.
Yeah, I remember going on that ride. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Then this wasn't the only film I wrote down that is a continuation of a movie involving primates of some variety. Later this year, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes will also be coming out. I have not seen any of the Planet of the Apes movies at this point. Some people have been telling me that at least some of them are really good, and some are even looking forward to this one. So maybe I'll try to catch up on the franchise to some degree. I don't know what films are connected to this one and which ones are not, so I'll have to do my research first. But I may end up checking this one out.
All right.
Then this next one I'm a little bit skeptical on. This being the Garfield movie. This is the one where Chris Pratt is once again starring in the lead role. I know that's been a joke for some people because it's happened a lot. But he is doing the voice of Garfield. There has been a trailer that came out, and honestly, it looks okay. It doesn't look phenomenal by any stretch of the imagination, but it at least looks okay. It might do at least relatively well, but right now I'm on the fence about that one.
Oh, well, I'm reading about it right now. It apparently it is written and directed by the guys who wrote and directed Emperor's New Groove. So
Oh,
yeah,
that part I didn't know.
yeah. So yeah, and apparently Samuel L. Jackson is also going to be starring in it,
Hmm.
and yeah. So and I like Emperor's New Groove, and so I don't know, might not be too bad.
If they did Emperor's New Groove and they worked really well with people like David Spade, Eartha Kitt, and Patrick Warburton, I'm sure they could do something here if they play their cards right.
Yeah.
Then the next one is a lot more well known. And for some of their franchises, Pixar will throw out a sequel to one of their movies, sometimes multiple or many sequels, like in the case of Toy Story. But the next Pixar sequel that's on the horizon right now is Inside Out 2. And after the first movie came out, I kept thinking if they do a sequel, it's probably going to cover Riley's first steps into the life of a teenager. And surely enough, that's what they were going to do. And now, as expected, they're adding more emotions to the main cast. And I think there was four, maybe five that they showed
Three,
off.
three, four, maybe five.
I
That
just hope they don't add too many, because sometimes if you add too many characters, it'll be hard to juggle them all, and some of them will get a lot less focus than others.
sure.
Um, but I feel like this one can be good, and I think it will end up doing really well. I'll probably see it at least once in theaters because I've been looking forward to a sequel for this one. Uh, I don't remember when the release date is, but it is a little bit later this year.
Yeah,
But we won't have to wait too much longer.
yeah. It is scheduled to be released June 14th, and it is written partly by Meg Lafave, who wrote the last film script, and uh, most of the original emotion character actors are back. A couple of them have been replaced, and but yeah, and we've got the additions of envy, embarrassment, anxiety, um, mm, boredom, and a bunch of new actors. And I feel like this could work because we covered kind of her preteen years already, and
Yep.
teen life can be, for one reason or another, a whole nother ball game, if you will. And they've put out a trailer, and I've seen it. I've got more confidence than not in it personally.
Yeah, a lot of sequels for people can really tarnish what the original set up, but this one looks to go against that, and it does look like it's going to be a fun ride.
Yeah, I will probably, by good chance, go see it.
Yeah, as will I. I definitely agree. But Inside Out is not the only animated movie to get a sequel. Because another one is Despicable Me 4. I am not entirely sure how I feel about this one. I felt the first two were really solid. The third one was okay, but I wasn't as invested. Uh, this fourth one, I feel like could work. I wasn't sure if they were going to make a fourth one, but it turns out they are. They also have a trailer out where Gru is now has a child of his own, so that could come into play. Um, I'm leaning towards going to see it when it comes out. I'm not entirely sure at this point, but this could be good. I don't know if it's guaranteed, but I feel like it has the possibility.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, I feel like, maybe one, maybe two were enough, but, and I feel like maybe franchises can maybe pro be prolonged a little bit too long or whatever, but they got some pretty cool casting. They brought back Kristen Wiig again, of course,
Right.
and also Chloe Fineman, who I previously expressed my admiration for. Don't know her role yet, but
Did or rather, is Miranda Cosgrove reprising
yes.
her role?
Yep,
She
she
is.
is.
Okay.
Yep. Uh,
But yeah, mostly on the fence at this one. Might go see it. If they release another trailer, that could sway my decision. Um, Maybe I'll wait until it comes out on DVD or something. We'll see. This is
I'll
a
have to
we'll
watch
see
a
movie.
trailer or something anyway.
Yeah. And of course, the minions are there, so they're probably going to take the world by storm again. Who knows?
Yeah.
Um, and then the next one I wrote down is Deadpool's third movie, but it's actually being called Deadpool and Wolverine. I know a lot of people are excited for this one, partly because, the Deadpool movies have been well received. Ryan Reynolds, I haven't seen the movies myself, but I've been told Ryan Reynolds is a legend as Deadpool. Like, he portrays the character really well. But I know a lot of people are excited for this movie in particular because of Wolverine and the fact that he is once again being played by Hugh Jackman. A lot of people love his portrayal of Wolverine. I know there's a small group out there that don't. Um, but I've personally enjoyed it from what I've seen. And a lot of people, after the movie Logan came out, it was supposed to be Hugh Jackman's final time as Wolverine. But when they announced this movie and the fact that he was going to reprise his role one more time, a lot of people were like, I'm going to go see it just for that.
Yeah, I don't know if I entirely blame them.
And it's also hinted at with this movie, with how they've presented stuff in the trailer, that Deadpool may very well be joining the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And if that's the case, it could be the boost that the MCU needs because they haven't had the best track record as of late.
X-Men isn't like considered MCU. I mean, I feel like it was like affiliated with Marvel. I guess it's just not MCU, right?
Well, there are some Marvel characters that are not necessarily owned by Marvel. A good example of that is anything that has to do with Spider Man, which includes the likes of Venom or Morbius or any of or like Madam Web that just came out not too long ago. Anything that has to do with Spider Man, it is Marvel, but the rights are owned by Sony, which is why, say, the Spider Man games recently have been PlayStation exclusive because PlayStation's also owned by Sony. There was a deal that Marvel had to reach with Sony or Disney, I guess, because Disney owns Marvel now. Um, they had to come to an agreement with Sony that would allow them to bring Spider Man into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And for a while, characters like Deadpool or the X-Men, I believe they were owned by Fox or like 20th Century Fox, something like that. But now that Disney owns that as well, they can now bring those characters into the MCU without, as far as I know, having to reach a deal with someone else.
Yeah, well, it's all complicated. I don't know if I get it, but yeah, it's what it is, I guess.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of legality things going on in there, but as far as I know, they now have the free liberty to bring in Deadpool and the X-Men and whatnot. Uh, then the next one I wrote down, I remember this film being announced a long time ago, and I was very confused. It's Harold and the Purple Crayon. The reason why I got confused by that is because it's a children's book, from what I remember, because I haven't read it in a long time, where this little kid has a purple crayon and he just does whatever with it. So when they announced this movie, I got really confused. It's like, how can they make an entire movie around this? But apparently they have an answer. I don't know if it's a good one or a bad one. As far as I know, there haven't been any trailers, but when they do, I'll check it out to see what kind of movie it could be, and that could sway my decision on whether or not I'll see it. But at this point, I'm just not sure.
Yeah, I saw like the poster, like I just looked it up on Wikipedia. It looks like, it kind of reminds me of like the criticism I've heard of. Did you see Shazam?
I did not. People told me that the first Shazam movie was really good, but then the sequel, Fury of the Gods, did not do so well.
Yeah, I feel like the one criticism I heard from one person was like it's kind of charming when he's in his guy body or young boy body, but then when he's Zachary Levi, because he's a kid, it comes off a bit awkward.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'm like I've always known Harold as a kid, and I'm like, in this poster he's grown. It seems a bit weird, but I don't know if they can make it work. Power to them.
Oh, for sure. And maybe that's just for star power, because a lot of times when you're making a movie, if you bring in somebody whose name a lot of people recognize, they might be more inclined to go see it. And maybe they could do something where it starts and ends with him as a grown-up Harold, but then most of the movie is him kind of going back and thinking about his childhood with this purple crayon. But I really have no idea right now.
Yeah, well, I guess this was kind of inevitable considering, if you go to the Barnes and Noble bookstore, which I've been doing a bit lately with one of our mutual friends, you can see they've got like a kids section with an image of Harold on the display. So this,
Yep,
I guess we had this one coming.
I guess so. It just took him a while, I guess.
Yeah.
Then the next one I wrote down is Craven the Hunter. This is another example of something that is associated with Spider-Man. And I'm not entirely sure if this is part of the MCU or not. I have a friend or two that would know this for sure. I haven't done the research, but for a while, Craven the Hunter was a little bit more of an obscure character, uh, especially since he wasn't necessarily superhuman. He had a lot of really good hunting skills and could take down other superhumans, including maybe the likes of Spider-Man, possibly. But then his popularity has really spiked recently because Sony's game Marvel Spider-Man 2, that was done with Insomniac, I believe, has been doing really well because that game franchise has performed great. Uh, and it heavily featured Craven the Hunter as one of the main villains. And a lot of people seem to like him, so I guess they were kind of banking on that while making this movie. It could do well, it may not. I don't know too much about Craven outside of what I saw in that game. So I feel like it has potential, but I don't know enough to say for sure.
I'm more in the dark than not myself. I guess that shows how out of touch I am with the some of the pop culture. But just reading up, he think debuted in Spider-Man comic book issue number 15, and this film apparently is co-written by the writers of the first MCU major movie, Iron Man. So
Yeah, the MCU started with the first Iron Man movie all the way back in 2008, and the MCU is still going. So that shows how much staying power that they've had. Of course, they also have a lot of material to work with. Um, but as mentioned, Craven the Hunter is a little bit more obscure for people, so I wouldn't blame anyone who hasn't heard of him. Um, but maybe this movie can bring popularity to this character. Who knows? Once I see a trailer or two, I'll be able to say for sure, or at least with more confidence as to whether or not I'll go see it. And then the next franchise movie. Also, I kind of tried to write this list, by the way, in order of like what's coming this year. Is for like Godzilla X Kong, for example, is the one closest to coming out, whereas some of the ones that I'll mention later are much further down the line this year. But the next one being Transformers 1. It is not like the first Transformers movie. The word one is literally in the title. And as far as I know, I think it's connected to a couple of the previous Transformers films, not like the five that Michael Bay was heavily involved in, but I'm talking about the movies like Bumblebee and Transformers Rise of the Beasts. I believe this movie is connected to those. Um, but I haven't heard much about it yet. There might be something mentioned about it recently that I've missed. I've got a friend of mine who's big into Transformers, so I could always ask him. Uh, I'll probably go see it since I've seen the other movies supposedly leading up to this one. I just can't say too much about it yet because I don't know much about it yet.
yeah, it's the animation I just looked up is provided by Industrial Light and Magic, which is the visual effects company founded by George Lucas. So that's pretty promising. And
Yeah, George Lucas has definitely worked on some films, mainly Star Wars, obviously, that have incredible effects, especially for the times they came out. So keeping that up, I'm sure this movie will at least look great. And then next on the list, another follow up to previous films, Venom 3, otherwise known as Venom the Last Dance. Like I was mentioning earlier, this is not part of the MCU because this is owned by Sony. Uh, there was a brief tease. I won't say exactly where in the Venom and MCU movies, but there was a brief clip in one of the films where Venom actually saw on TV an image of Tom Holland as Spider-Man, which told everybody that Venom could be joining the MCU. And then in a following film later, that tease was kind of taken away, but not really, because they are saying that Venom could still be in the MCU in the near future. Maybe just not the same one, but there's a lot of technicalities with that. Um, but these Venom films have been in their own separate universe up to this point. And so far, I've personally enjoyed them. I know a lot of people are kind of 50-50. Some of them really like these movies, some of them don't. Um, but Venom the Last Dance, I think could be good. I'm not sure I was too fond of the fact that they got rid of Carnage already. Maybe they'll find a way to bring him back somehow. But The Last Dance, I think that could imply this is the last movie in this Venom universe, but I'm not entirely sure what they're gonna do because Carnage, in his own universe, is one of Venom's biggest foes, and considering he's already faced and defeated him, I'm not sure who they're gonna put him up against. Maybe some other big symbiote, but they did show one or two set photos recently where some of the actors were on set. Not that that helps much, but they're at least letting the fans know, hey, we're working on this. The movie will come out later this year. I will probably go see it because Venom is one of my favorite Spider-Man characters. So got my fingers crossed.
Yeah, they have a date set. It's October 25th. So
Kind of makes sense because while Venom isn't necessarily a horror franchise, he's definitely a bit on the creepy side for some people, particularly his design and his big gangly teeth and angry eyes and whatever. Um, so he does have that going for him. Makes sense that it would come out around the end of October.
sure.
But another movie that I know a lot of people are looking forward to is Wicked. This movie is based off the musical of the same name that is mostly I haven't seen the musical. I know big shocker to some. Uh but from what I understand, it focuses on Glinda the Good Witch and the Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz. Um and it's a really popular one. Like I've heard so many people talk about this musical over the years and how some of them have seen it on Broadway, some of them have done it themselves to some capacity or at least know the songs really well. So when they announced that a film adaptation was coming, they've been really excited. And I don't remember all the actors' names, but I think they said Ariana Grande was going to be one of them,
She
and
will play Galinda. Yeah.
she will be. Okay.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
just read that Jeff Goldblum is playing the wizard, which is pretty interesting. Yeah, he has a kind of nice, innocent, kind of fun, upbeat vibe about him that might be entertaining to watch in this movie. I think it might fit.
if done right, yes, because Jeff Goldblum is a good actor. I feel like he could pull it off. Um, I guess we'll just have to see at this point. I'll. This is one of those movies where I might go see it if somebody invites me to go with them. Because on my own, I may not go see it. But if some
Yeah,
friends
same.
are, maybe I'll join them.
Oh yeah, same here. I mean, I know a little bit of the musical soundtrack, and I know there was one cover version of one of the songs that I really got invested in, but other than that, I haven't really been that honestly invested, if I'm really
Sure.
honest.
I will say there is one song in that production, which I think is one of the more popular songs from what I understand. It's called Defying Gravity.
Sure.
I've seen some YouTubers cover it. I've seen some friends sing it, and even I've sung it in some scenarios. Like there's an airport in North Carolina, I believe it is, where sometimes I run into this guy who plays the piano, and it's gotten to the point where he and I sort of recognize each other whenever we pass through and I see him there. And once or twice before my next flight, we sing that song, and it's a lot of fun. Uh, but yeah, like I said, I might go see it if some friends invite me. Other than that, probably not. It may not just be for me.
Oh, yeah, likely same here.
Cool. Uh, then the next one I wrote down is more of a surprise because the announcement for it kind of came out of nowhere, and that being the sequel to Moana. For a little while now, we've already known that Moana was getting a live action remake, which to me is a little ridiculous since the movie's only been out for a few years. So why make a live action remake already? I don't know if it's just because they want to keep Dwayne Johnson in the role of Maui while he's still the way he is, like the way he's built and whatever. I don't know. Um, but then out of nowhere earlier this year, in fact, I think it might have been last month, they just made some random announcement. Hey, we're making a Moana sequel, and it's coming out later this year. And a lot of people are like, oh, okay, cool. I had no idea. I was kind of hoping for one, but now it's official.
Yeah, honestly, from what I've pulled up just now, it sounds like a little too similar to the original film in terms of plot, but they are bringing back both Ali'i Carvalho and The Rock to reprise their roles, and which I very much welcome with open arms.
Oh, for
Yeah,
sure.
I don't know. So, like Wicked, again, I probably wouldn't go on my own terms, but would go to um, bond with a loved one or something. So,
Yeah, I might go see it. I kind of need to know a little bit more about it first because I don't know what they're going to do since they resolved that big plot in the first film and they
right.
restored the land and the sea and whatever. So I don't know what they could do. Maybe there's a bigger threat they can come up with, but time will tell.
Yeah, it's kind of like my initial reaction when I heard The Force Awakens was coming out. I'm like, everybody already got freed. What more is there to do? I don't know. That was at least my initial thought.
I was kind of along the same vein, but I know in the Star Wars universe, uh, even in some of the previous films, they could be like, "Oh, the Sith haven't come back. You're just crazy." But it's like, no, they're back and they're stronger than ever, and that's kind of what Force Awakens did too. Uh, I know they're planning on making more Star Wars movies. I think they want to center at least one or two around Rey, who was featured in the sequel trilogy. Um, I'm not sure about those because the sequel trilogy didn't grab me as much as the other six did.
Yeah, honestly, me either.
I mean, some parts of it were cool, like Kylo Ren's lightsaber, and one or two story elements, like seeing Mark Hamill as Luke again. But even then, it wasn't enough for me.
I mean, even Last Jedi was a little bit more intriguing, but I really don't think I got much out of it as a whole. That
Well, I
that
think,
yeah, that whole
yeah,
sequel series.
right, right. I think the sequel trilogy had the disadvantage of originally planning to have a different director for each of the three movies. But then, like J.J. Abrams did Force Awakens, and they had another guy do Last Jedi, who kind of not necessarily picked apart everything that Abrams had been setting up, but definitely kind of messed with where Abrams was taking the story. So they brought J.J. Abrams back for Rise of Skywalker, and he had to try and rope everything back in, and it just did not work out. I don't think they needed to bring Palpatine back. They could have had some other big threat. Like they got rid of Snoke for some reason in The Last Jedi. He could have been the big overarching baddie of the trilogy. But yeah, a lot of things were kind of juggled around in a way that made it really messy.
Yeah, it's what it is.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, then I had three more entries here. I know this is a longer list, but I
Sure.
tried to keep it relatively short for each entry when I could. Uh, but this next one, I put a question mark next to because I wasn't sure how legit this is. But according to IMDb, there's supposedly going to be another Lord of the Rings movie later this year, as well as another Karate Kid movie.
Hmm.
I don't know how true these things are. Supposedly, Karate Kid is going to bring back Jackie Chan like they did with that movie in 2010. But there really isn't much talked about. I think IMDb even listed it as the unnamed Karate Kid movie. So they don't even have a title for it yet.
And
If this is
apparently,
real,
Ralph Macchio is going to be in it.
I guess it's official then. I'm not sure what they're going to do, but who knows? So that's more of a speculation type thing because really nothing has been said about them. I'm not sure what they're going to do with Lord of the Rings because they already defeated Sauron and all that many years ago. And those three movies before the Hobbit films came out were fine. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Then Disney, usually when they do a live action remake, they just leave it at that and they move on to the next one in a separate franchise. But now they're not quite entirely doing that because I mean a little while ago I think they announced a sequel to the live action Aladdin, but the entry I'm talking about specifically that is supposed to come out later this year, I believe, is a prequel to the live action Lion King that'll focus on a younger Mufasa. And I think it's just called Mufasa.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking it up right now. Yeah. I had no idea about that. Yeah, and it looks like I'm taking looks like Seth Rogen and Billy Eichner will return as Pumbaa and Timon respectively, and that'll be coming out scheduled for December 20th. Yep.
I will say The Lion King, not my favorite live action remake. There are definitely some that I liked a little bit more for sure. Um, so I don't know why they decided to add another one to this particular franchise, but maybe a prequel can help it. I'm not entirely sure. But for me, I think the biggest issue that the live action remake of Lion King suffered from is that everything looked too real. And because of that, the animals couldn't really express. They all had the same emotion on their face, regardless of what they were feeling. And that kind of took away a lot of the more emotional moments. Because if they don't look emotional, why should we feel emotional?
Oh yeah, right.
So I'm not really looking forward to this one. I probably won't go see it. Maybe if some people say it's good, I might check it out at some point, but I just don't see the point.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't. Yeah, I don't see much of a legitimate point myself. I'll admit.
It just seems kind of silly. Maybe they're trying to save themselves from the results of the live action remake. I don't know. But regardless, my final entry on here is probably the one I'm looking forward to the most. Of course it is, but in that same month will be the third installment in the Sonic the Hedgehog movies. I am a big Sonic fan, so I'm already looking forward to it for that reason alone. But the second one built up excitement for the third one really well. They announced that Jim Carrey is reprising his role. A lot of people weren't sure for a while because it sounded like he was fairly certain about retiring from acting, but it is official. He is coming back, and they're bringing in one of my favorite characters. In fact, I recently got a little figure of him. There he is. Um, but especially for video game movies, these particular films have been doing much better than most. So that's really saying something. So as long as they keep that up, this third movie is gonna probably blow most of the other video game movies in existence out of the water.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I guess.
I've got my fingers crossed. I have high hopes for this.
Yeah. Okay. Um. Yeah, I actually wrote down like a few of the same titles that we've covered already, but well, because we've already covered them, I just decided I'm going to skip them and move on to the different ones that I had. And these entries aren't necessarily based on legitimate personal interest as much as they are based on just me tirelessly researching to prepare for this show, really. But Anyway, and so the first unique entry that I had was the upcoming film of Beetlejuice, which when I saw the title, like, "Ah, I see what you did there. That's pretty cool." And and it is directed by Tim Burton and Michael Keaton reprising his role as the titular Beetlejuice, and also got Winona Ryder, frequent Burton collaborator, as well as Jenna Ortega, star of Wednesday. So that's already some pretty solid casting. I think that should be pretty interesting. If I like the trailer, I'll have to watch it. I'll maybe give that a whirl.
Yeah, I never actually did see the original film,
Neither
although
did
I know
I.
it's apparently though it's got a popular fan base, and apparently Michael Keaton was well praised for his role. Although, funny enough, from what I understand, not too long after Beetlejuice is when they announced that he would be playing Batman. But because he just played some zany characters like Beetlejuice, everyone was like, there's no way he can be Batman. And now, of course, he is a lot of people's favorite iteration of Batman. And now that he's coming back to some familiar roles, like he just did Batman recently and now Beetlejuice, I feel like that's going to fill up a lot of seats on that alone.
Yeah, well, I am a Michael Keaton fan, and I think well, Winona Ryder has done really well in Stranger Things, and I take Ortega. I think she collaborated with Burton on Wednesday, so I think this has um odds well in its favor. I think.
Was the Wednesday Netflix show done by Tim Burton?
Yeah, it's kind of what I'm wondering.
Okay, I wasn't entirely sure. Maybe it was. But I mean, the Adams Family style of story is definitely up his alley. So I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case.
Yeah, well, he directed some of the episodes, and his company is one of the producing companies on it. So
Okay.
yeah,
But yeah, Beetlejuice, I'm
yep.
sure will at least get a lot of people in. Let's just hope it performs well on top of that.
All right, and then Disney has announced the coming of another Frozen film, a third Frozen, which will be in November 2026. I don't know too much about it. I believe most or maybe all of the principal cast from the original entry will be back for this. And Chris Buck, who I think directed before, will be doing it again. And so I'm sure that's something a lot of people are really excited about. And you know, I I have to confess I've only seen the first one, but I am very open if someone else is really interested.
I'm not sure how I feel about it. I've liked what Frozen has done before, at least to a point. I definitely think the music in the second movie was great. Um, I just don't think Frozen needs a third movie. I don't think they even planned to make a second one, but once they saw how popular that first movie did and how well it did financially, like, oh, we could make more money off of this. Let's make another one. And I got to be honest, I think Frozen has been a little bit overhyped, especially after Let It Go came out. I think that song alone is part of the reason why it got so big. Um, I'll probably still see it at some point. I'm just not as excited as everybody else is. Um, and personally, if Frozen can have three and possibly more movies, I think Tangled should get a full on 3D CGI sequel like they did with the first movie. I know a lot of people might say, "Hey, Tangled got an animated series in like 2D instead of 3D." It's like, yes, I guess that kind of counts, but I'm talking about cinematic releases, and I think Tangled should get another one if Frozen is going to have at least 3.
Yeah,
But
maybe
that's
right.
just me.
Yeah, and then I had no idea until I was researching for this show. There's actually going to be a film based on the Loud House spin-off, the Casa Grandes. So for those who don't know, the Casa Grande family is basically a sort of Mexican heritage family in the like downtown part of the town where the Loud House and its spin-off, the Casa Grandes, is set. And, and I'm gonna take and one of them is dating the oldest Loud sister, and there's sort of a romantic link between the sister and the Loud brother Lincoln. So yeah, but the one thing that I am kind of intrigued about is like I know like they're reprising these roles from the show. The Carlos Pena Vega is Bobby, and his wife. He's married to Spy Kids star Alexa Vega, who is also another one of the Casa Grande family. I don't know if anyone I know would be really up for that, and I don't know if I would be, but if it does well, I don't know if I can complain.
Oh, for sure. I can't say too much on the matter because I don't have the channels that have stuff like the Loud House and by extension the Casa Grandes on it. But I know some people who are fans of the show and fans of the spinoff. So I'm sure they are at least excited. I probably won't go see it because I don't know much about them. But for fans of the Casa Grandes, I'm hoping for the best for you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one film that I'm a little bit more anticipating is I think this is supposed to come out not maybe for a whole nother year or so, but someone is making a biopic of Michael Jackson. And I've probably talked about this in the show's past how there needs to be a more accurate, or there should be a more accurate chronicling of Michael Jackson's life and career story that we've never really gotten to see. And I'm kind of hoping. I don't think there's much publicly available information about this movie yet, but I'm hoping that this does that because you know, we glamorize, for lack of a better word, anyway. The careers of very charismatic or very successful or revolutionary celebs, but we don't probably enough acknowledge uh, uh, the deeply troubling personal stuff that was going on with them that pretty much wrecked their lives and in the case of Michael, ultimately maybe led to him being dead at 50 with too many drugs in his system. So
Right.
I'm hoping, maybe that this film maybe celebrates the wins and the groundbreaking achievements of his career, but at the same time also acknowledges that how psychologically damaged he was from an early age and how that carried on well into his career.
Yeah, I would definitely say, especially since they made an Elvis movie, that they should also do a Michael Jackson movie, whether it be kind of stylized like the Elvis one or designed more like a documentary. But it could be, how I'll put it, a combination of the Elvis movie where it kind of goes into some of the big achievements and some of the conflicts, but also maybe do something similar to what a docuseries came out recently did called Quiet on Set, which is a docuseries that came out not too long ago that covered what some of the child stars, especially through Nickelodeon, some of the darker stuff, like the much darker stuff that they experienced while working on some of those shows that we grew up with. So maybe they could do a combination of those two things and really show what Michael Jackson's life was really like, especially behind the scenes.
Yeah, or do something like they did with the docudrama The Social Dilemma, where they did scripted scenes, but also maybe some interviews intercut. Maybe.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I just I feel like and I'm probably not the first to say this, but I feel like if we don't acknowledge more, do a better job of openly acknowledging the crap that went on with Michael and how that psychologically destroyed him,
Mhm.
history is probably just going to keep repeating itself unless we do something different.
Sure, I get
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, I did hear about that Quiet on the Set documentary. I haven't seen it, at least not yet, but I did, you know, watch some stuff on Watch Mojo that about some of the stuff that's detailed, and maybe that's a discussion for another time. But anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
Um, this one is something I just found out about, and it sounds like it's something that I really didn't expect to hear about at all. I never really imagined this, but it does sound especially interesting. Apparently, Jerry Seinfeld is making a sort of comedy film about the origin story of Pop Tarts.
I do think I heard something about something like that being made a little while ago. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a film or something, but apparently it is. And I mean, a film like that can work because I think they also made a movie, I think in recent years, that kind of covered how the shoes for Michael Jordan were made.
Oh, I saw that one. Yeah,
So it's like if they can do a movie about the creation of a brand of shoes, they can probably do one for Pop Tarts.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I saw that Air movie, and from the description that I've read, it sounds more like this Pop Tart movie is something more like akin to like what they did with the Weird Al movie. If you saw Weird, the Al Yankovic story with Daniel Radcliffe, and
I haven't seen that, but people told me it was really good and that Daniel Radcliffe had a really good portrayal of Weird Al.
oh yeah, yeah, and akin in the sense like it wasn't like a serious effort to really tell the true story, but was like it took like elements from it and kind of created a fictionalized comedic script.
Sure.
So I feel like it sounds like that's basically what they're doing. The same thing with this Pop Tart movie, and I feel like uh, that could make it something very special and very fun to watch. So, and that's coming out in May. So, and that'll be apparently on Netflix. So, when that drops, I might give it a click.
Yeah, I might check it out at
Yeah,
some point. I don't have access to Netflix at this point, but if people say it's good, I might check it out. I feel like it has potential.
yeah,
So who knows?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, so that's my whole list, and we're going to move on, I guess, to a curious question of what are some famous dead people you might like to see documentary films about?
And I wrote down about 5 or 6 of these, but I will say right off the bat, one of them was Michael Jackson, but since you already mentioned that they're going to make a Michael Jackson movie, that probably doesn't need much discussion.
I think there's been like one documentary special or another, like on HBO or something that's covered some stuff. So
Okay.
maybe that's far out of reach or far beyond the possibility at this point.
Yeah, maybe I'll check it out if I can find it, but for now, I'll see what they do with this upcoming one. Uh, but the first one I thought of when we were thinking about who we were going to list for this episode, right off the bat, was Robin Williams. The guy is an acting legend. He's a comedic legend. He could make so many people laugh just based on something that he created off the top of his head with no preparation whatsoever. He could just say or do or think something and it would be outstanding. It would be hilarious. And of course, a lot of people might have grown up with him as, say, the genie in Aladdin, or as a grown up Peter Pan in the movie Hook, or in some other animated and live action films. I personally loved when he was Theodore Roosevelt in the Night at the Museum movies. And I'll tell you, when he passed around the time the third Night at the Museum came out, and some of his lines in that third movie were things like, "Let us go, we're ready," that legit made me cry.
Mm.
But with how much of an impact he had on the world with his many skills, and everybody says we're not going to have another Robin Williams ever. He is absolutely unique, and I feel like that story should be told.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I grew up with a handful of his films as well, like Hook and Jumanji. I don't know. I don't remember if I saw that as a kid or not, and stuff like Flubber. And I remember shortly after he passed away, my brother and I kind of did a little commemoration for him by watching Dead Poet Society, which was a good one. I don't know if you did, I
Mrs.
don't know if you
Doubtfire,
watched
another
any of
big
his
one.
films. Sorry, what?
I said Mrs. Doubtfire was another one.
Yeah. I don't know if you watched anything like to commemorate him, like after he passed on.
I don't remember exactly what I did after it happened. I know it definitely had an impact on me for a good chunk of time because he definitely made me laugh a lot. I grew up with some of the movies that he starred in, and he definitely helped motivate me in terms of acting and whatnot. Uh, so it was a heavy blow, and it certainly didn't help that I lost some of my family earlier the same year. But yeah, that definitely was a heavy blow, and I'm certainly going to miss him. And I feel like those who haven't seen his story before definitely should. Then the next person I wrote down, I think we ended up both writing this one, was Steve Harwell. He was the lead singer for the band Smash Mouth, and he passed away, I want to say last year, the year before. But a lot of people, they might not know him by name, but like I said, he's part of Smash Mouth. And especially for a lot of younger viewers, he might be known for singing a couple songs in the first Shrek movie. And he's got some other well known songs. He and his band made a guest appearance in one or two episodes of Kim Possible. Uh, so they definitely got around and they definitely had some musical talent, whether it was memed or not. And I know through at least one or two instances that were shown on camera that his behavior wasn't 100% perfect, but whose is honestly. Um, like I think there was one where he jumped into the audience and he was visibly angry or something like that. But yeah, I definitely think he should be recognized in some capacity.
Oh yeah, he's like part of some music that defined a whole generation. Like when we were kids, like growing up in the early 2000s, like their band was so prolific, not just for music that contributed to Shrek, but also for other songs like "Then the Morning Comes" and "Walking on the Sun," which is probably one of my favorite of theirs. And yeah, yeah, it's And suddenly they had a sound vocally and musically that like is so unique it and well, not that easy to forget. I mean,
for sure. And I mean, especially Harwell, he's got a singing voice where the moment you hear it, you know exactly who it is. Some
yeah,
singers sound very similar, if not exactly the same, but his voice was distinct. And like you said, he and his band were everywhere. In fact, another song that I liked that was featured in the movie The Pacifier that they had, I think it was the official name is something like Everyday Superhero, but I still go back and listen to that song every so often because it's powerful. It's a fun, catchy song.
oh, was that the one that played in the end credits? Because I don't remember hearing it during the actual film.
I think it might have been the end credits, and there was a montage scene somewhere in the movie. I'm pretty sure that featured that song. But
I
I'll
know
have
there
to
was a
double check.
montage scene that featured the anthem by Good Charlotte. So I
Sure.
remember that.
Yeah, I think at some point in the movie there was a montage where he was getting more accustomed to taking proper care of the kids, especially a couple of the younger ones. And I'm pretty sure they played that song. Maybe I'll ask my mom or something because she and I used to watch that movie growing up.
Yeah, right.
Then I also thought of Betty White. I know a lot of people, they talked about how she seemed like a lady that was absolutely invincible. Like she just had this fiery spirit to the point where people said, I don't think she can die.
Yeah, and
And
for a time it seemed like she couldn't.
yeah, it seemed like she was practically immortal. And now she has a chance to be immortalized. And I know because of how many people said how tough and resilient she was and how she was able to look and act so young despite being 99 years old. I know it hit a lot of people when the fact that she passed away on New Year's Eve, just months shy of turning 100. She was so close. And in fact, people had pointed out if leap years weren't a thing and February was extended by a day every 4 years, she technically would have been 100 by that point.
Yeah, and there was like a whole special like celebrating her centennial, but she didn't quite get there.
Oh, for sure. Everybody was thinking she was going to make it with so many being like, "Oh, that at this point it seems impossible that she won't turn 100." And then she fell just short. And
Mm.
even Watch Mojo, I remember they had at least a couple lists ready to go in advance because they were going to celebrate her 100th year, but then they released them early as a tribute in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I did actually when I was in Lake Placid, I did watch an episode or two of The Golden Girls and yeah, I don't say I ever really got that much into the show, but I had a pretty good experience with it.
Right. And it would be cool to see what her life was like that led to so many people just loving her in general. And then the last one I wrote down is an entry that was added very recently because they actually passed away earlier this month of March 2024. And that is Akira Toriyama. I've talked about him a couple times on social media, and in my voice acting class, we've already done a fan dub as a tribute to this guy.
Mm.
But for the few that don't happen to know who he is, Akira Toriyama is one of the biggest names in the anime and manga world. He's of course created characters like Arail, I think that's how you say it, but he's created things like Dr. Slump, Sandman, but I think most people will recognize him for the fact that he was the original creator behind the Dragon Ball franchise. He is the person responsible for characters like Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, Piccolo, Frieza, uh, and so many other anime and manga stories were inspired by him. Even American cartoons would reference it sometimes. Like I know at some point, The Amazing World of Gumball even had this random scene where one of the main characters, for a brief second, went Super Saiyan, which is right out of Dragon Ball entirely. So many people were moved by the stories he would tell, by these characters that he would talk about, that he would create, and all the motivational stories he would tell, how people would get back up after a loss or defeat and just keep going. And the fact that he passed away out of nowhere hit the world hard, to the point where in various Dragon Ball games, they would pay tribute to him by doing this one particular move involving raising their hands up towards the sky. And I know there was this country in another part of the world where 20,000 people gathered to do the exact same thing in real life. And of course, a lot of the voice actors talked about him. A lot of Dragon Ball based YouTubers would talk about him. But just the impact that this guy had on the world, I feel like definitely deserves to be immortalized. And I feel like at least one documentary film would help do that.
Yeah, it was a big surprise. I had no idea until it came up on the internet, like the other week or something. That- Well, well, it just happened, I guess. But yeah, yeah, that is a big loss, definitely.
Yeah, even the internet didn't know right away because it wasn't announced until I think March 8th. But they mentioned how he passed away about a week before that. But they, for the sake of privacy for his family and whatnot, they waited about a week to say anything. But of course, when they did say it, news quickly spread, it hit a lot of people hard. And I know so many people, myself included, are going to miss him. I mean, even the voice actor in English, at least, for Goku, Sean Schemmel, despite having never met him, he talked about how Akira Toriyama really saved his life. Because after he got the role of Goku, he used that money for therapy, and that therapy saved his life. So, technically speaking, Akira Toriyama saved this voice actor's life just through the stories he would create.
That reminds me of a story of well, there's an actor I grew up watching in the first couple Shiloh films, Scott Wilson, who played Judge Travers, and then years later played the farmer Herschel on Walking Dead. Uh, I saw an interview with him once. He talked about kind of how he got started in acting. He had had some struggles with alcoholism or something, and then and then some friend kind of got him involved in some sort of workshop or something, and that kind of took his life in a better direction.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I had actually a very long list, longer than usual list for my answers here, but um, so my first one was probably not as well known by name actress, but a pretty significant contributor nonetheless. Judith
Hmm.
Barcy, probably best known for voicing the main human girl in the first All Dogs Go to Heaven film by Don Bluth. Um, and I read, she was considered, an actress was um, who was talented beyond her young years. She was so young and was so exceptionally skilled. And but Um, her life tragically was cut short by a gunshot when she was only 10 years old.
Oh my goodness.
One of the saddest things.
It's like, what kind of person do you need to be to shoot a child?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I think, some kind of documentary that reflected on maybe her troubled family life, but also her skill as an actress would probably be very deserved.
Right. And I'm looking at this now, and apparently not only was she was shot by while she was sleeping, and it was done by her father.
Yeah.
And then he also ended up shooting his wife and then doing the same to himself.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. And then another tragic story, Steve McNair, who who was a pretty historical NFL quarterback. He was actually the first ever black player or black quarterback to win MVP of the NFL, and he was the first official guy to play quarterback for the Tennessee Titans under the Tennessee Titans name. And like in I think it was their first year under the Tennessee Titans name, they made a Super Bowl appearance and came pretty close to winning, came within 7 points of winning.
Oh man.
And and en route to that Super Bowl appearance, he was part of the trick play that became dubbed the Music City Miracle, in which they won under unusual conditions on a trick play in the final seconds against the Bills. And but tragically, someone that he I guess had some romantic connection to for whatever reason shot him dead.
Yeah, according to this, his girlfriend, who was only 20 at the time, while he was closer to 36, shot him 4 times.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So maybe something to look at his historical career and maybe his personal life a little bit would probably intrigue me.
Yeah, they've done some docu-series about other football players before.
Yeah,
So I feel like that could be done.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And one other guy I thought of, Alan Sherman, a legendary comic musician, who would do like parodies of like popular songs, also do some funny lyrical songs set to classical pieces. And he's considered like a pioneer of the genre. Some would say we wouldn't have artists that we have today, like say Weird Al Yankovic, among others, if it had not been for his influence. And I read up a bit on his story. It's a bit interesting. He had a pretty dramatic personal life, and struggled with health complications toward the end of his life, and died of respiratory failure. You know, maybe something to kind of look at his innovative career and his personal life. I would probably want to look at.
yeah, I'm already kind of looking into his story a little bit, and it looks like he did have a big influence on some people that we definitely grew up with.
Yeah, yeah,
But apparently he had some tragedies of his own. And then while he was trying to entertain some people, he passed away out of nowhere.
yeah, yeah. Well, then we have a more famous example in Carrie Fisher, best known for playing Princess Leia in the original Star Wars film trilogy. And she actually comes from a family in which professional Hollywood entertainment runs pretty deep. Her mom was Debbie Reynolds of Singing in the Rain fame, and had a dad who was an actor, and also, but more personally, she had some, I think, some struggles with mental illness and drugs and stuff that
Yeah.
and pretty dramatic. And she kind of wrote some stuff inspired by that. And you know, so touching on all of that, I think it would be something worthy to look at.
I would definitely say so. And if they do that for Carrie Fisher, they can probably at least throw in a segment or two covering her mom who passed away around the same time. I think it was shortly after.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And one, I think, on a more positive note, um, was Saturday Night Live comedian Phil Hartman. He was he had some pretty good performances on Saturday Night Live. The thing that really intrigued me about his story, really, I was his reputation for being a pretty classy, professional, down to earth guy. In fact, he was nicknamed the Glue because of his ability to keep stuff together. He
Hmm.
was known to be like a more positive, encouraging presence, and low key, humble kind of guy. And that's something I feel like I can say about a lot of comedians that I know. I mean, there's some I like who can separate rate themselves from their art pretty well, but this was someone who I think had a little more approachability that I don't know if I perceive that much in a lot of other comedians, dead, alive, whatever. So I would, I think he deserves a documentary. I think.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like he should have one. And I know a lot of people, they can be absolutely famous, but then when you meet them in person or try to approach them, they can just turn into total jerks. So if this guy was as friendly as you say, I'd say he deserves it
Yeah,
to be recognized anyway.
yeah, yeah. I also thought of Roy Disney, the older brother of Walt Disney, and is considered the Disney company's by some he's considered the Disney company's unsung hero. Now, he was the guy who kind of like co-founded the company with Walt and kind of managed or oversaw like the financial operations of it or whatever. And uh, Walt would often, confide in Roy like for some practical advice on on what to do about this project, whether to move forward with it. But then, of course, uh, in 1965, Walt passed on, and then Roy kind of took over the company, and then and at the time of Walt's death, if you know your history, he had been planning Disney World, and but before that could really be like finished, he passed away of cancer, and so then Roy takes over, and and is determined to finish this Florida resort project that we know today as Disney World. He most people in his place probably would have just done whatever they want, run everything on their own terms, but he decided, no, no, this is my brother's business empire. We're going to carry it on. We're going to. This was his vision. That I was meant to further his work. So we're going to keep doing that. Eventually, they finish Disney World uh, shortly before Roy dies, and he even once said that my whole life, my whole career was all about. The whole goal of it was to you know help my brother's dreams come alive. That was my goal. That was what I lived this whole career for. And he even insisted on naming the resort not Disney World, but Walt Disney World, acknowledging, what this was my brother's vision, and it deserves to bear his name. It should bear his name on it.
Sure.
That's like a refreshingly like like selfless, supportive kind of brother story that I feel like well, has got to be commended probably more than it has been.
Sure, and that's the thing too, is a lot of people, when the torch is passed to them from somebody whose name is arguably bigger than theirs, they might be like, "Oh, now that I'm in charge, I'll take the story where I want it." But I think a respectable person, while putting their own spin on a couple things, should at least for the most part take everything in the direction that the original creator had intended. And if Roy did that, I think that deserves to be recognized too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I've talked about this one other guy before, Chuck Colson, who founded the nonprofit Prison Fellowship. Which, for those of you who don't know, he kind of started this organization, sort of that ministers with the gospel to inmates in prisons, and and mm, his backstory is interesting because he was actually involved as a co-conspirator in the Watergate scandal of the 1970s and was eventually incarcerated for it, and then came to faith in Jesus, and then kind of shared his story, started this ministry. It's almost like an Apostle Paul story where one goes from one side of the war to the other. It's a pretty sweet story.
Okay. Yeah, I personally don't know too much about him, but I will definitely take your word for it on this one.
Yeah, yeah. And then this one, kind of for history's sake, Charles Mintz, who was a distributor who was kind of business partners with Walt Disney in like the early days of his studio, and then a turning point in the history of his career and company came when Mintz told him that he had actually hired away a bunch of animators who had been working under Walt, and in response, uh, Walt conceived what we know today as Mickey Mouse. And so it's kind of it's kind of like we were just in our Bible study going through Genesis, and we just wrapped up that book, and kind of how talking about how God brought all this tough stuff for good, and feel like I kind of would be kind of interested to see me kind of what Mince's motivations were, and kind of how in a way that kind of changed the course of animation and led to the making of Mickey.
Yeah, according to this article I'm looking at right now, Mintz was dubbed Disney's first villain.
Yeah,
So they could definitely make a docu series or documentaries surrounding that idea.
yeah, yeah. Kind of a more positive note. There was a guy who worked with Walt at the time named Ub Iwerks, who was responsible for actually doing all of the animation for the first Mickey Mouse cartoon in the late 1920s.
Steamboat Willie?
A little bit before that, actually, it was a cartoon called Plain Crazy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, but Steamboat Willie came shortly after, though.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then I also thought of Walt's son-in-law, Ron Miller, who, for a time, a little ways into the 80s, actually served as the head of the Walt Disney Company. He was actually, yeah, well, Walt's son-in-law through his marriage to his daughter, and actually is credited with expanding the repertoire or horizon of the Disney Company by creating the Touchstone Pictures label, which was a label within Disney that would specialize in creating more mature or more non-family or adult entertainment, as opposed to just the kids and family stuff that Disney had been pretty much always known for. So had it not been for him, Disney probably would have been stuck in a box and not had that much versatility. So he probably deserves recognition for that.
Oh, for sure. And The thing with him being related to Walt Disney is because he's not Walt Disney himself. His name might go a bit more under the radar, which is a shame. And I feel like making something like this can really help people recognize the work that was done by other people who worked in the same company.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I also thought of you know, he's not known for, I guess, as much significant stuff, but there was a dancer and stunt performer named Alex Plashart, who, among other projects with like Debbie Reynolds and Gene Kelly, also was an ensemble dancer as a chimney sweep in Mary Poppins.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
I, I'm assuming like the original
yeah.
like film.
1964 Disney film. Yeah,
Right. Okay.
yeah. I also thought of James Horner, a film composer responsible for the scores of Titanic and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, as well as the 1990s Universal Pictures logo. So, yeah. So, those are some, most of that stuff is pretty nostalgic for me. So, I think I would probably be intrigued to kind of know more about him and and his craft and his sort of musical vision.
And the thing I will add to that is that they will make documentaries or docuseries often about like the actors of famous projects or the original creator behind some of these projects. But I think some of the people who work behind the scenes deserve to be recognized as well, like composers such as James Horner or costume artists, makeup artists. A lot of people take what they see for granted, or in cases like this, what they hear. And like with what I was just saying a moment ago, this could be a good way to help bring other people whose name isn't recognized, but their work has definitely been witnessed. This could help other people learn who this guy was and what kind of an impact he actually made.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I thought of folk singer Gordon Lightfoot, a Canadian folk singer who I never really heard much of his music, really. I think I might have only heard one of his songs, but I feel like he was, from what I understand, and a very prolific, very legendary, and he was an inspiration for part of one of Weird Al Yankovic's pastiche parodies.
Oh,
And so and so, I kind of like to maybe know a little bit more about him, like of like his musical vision, that kind of thing, I think.
yeah, I'm reading up a little bit on him right now, and apparently he received 5 Grammy nominations over the course of his career, and then he won 17 Juno Awards, which is, according to this, Canada's equivalent music honor.
Yeah, yeah. And then I've got like just three more that are kind of similarly linked because I know them. They've somehow, probably the reason I thought of them and kind of stuck with it, probably because I know they've all done cover versions of, or they've all sung Jamaica Farewell. I thought of Samuel E. Wright, the voice actor of Sebastian the Crab, who died of prostate cancer in recent years, as well as Jimmy Buffett, the legendary country island escapism musician, and Harry Belafonte, legendary reggae musician.
The latter two of those names
Yeah,
I'm not as familiar with, and that's probably just because I haven't heard a lot of their music. But when it comes to Samuel Wright, when that particular passing took place, that definitely felt a little more personal to me because back in, I think it was 2018, I played Sebastian in Artists Unlimited's production of The Little Mermaid. So it's like I played the character that this guy is really well known for. And then when he passed, it's like, well, now I just hope that my portrayal did his justice because he was phenomenal in the role. I still quote some of his lines a lot, quite frankly, even if it's just to myself. So he's definitely going to be missed, just like the other two that you mentioned. But yeah, that particular one definitely hit a little closer to home.
Yeah. Yeah. I can understand that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's really all I've got. And so I guess that's a wrap. So, like I said in the intro, and I'll put this intro at the beginning. So, if you could just, you know, take advantage of those platforms, use direct messaging, commenting, email, whatever, and continue to chime in and talk with us as you feel you would like.
Yeah, we just love interacting with people all the time, and which is quite a statement to make because I used to be so nervous with any kind of social interaction, whether it be over the internet or in person. But thanks to groups like Artists Unlimited and some of my various friends and family, I've gotten a lot better at that. So I would love to interact with as many people who tune into this show as possible. Any questions you guys have, any comments, anything you want us to talk about in a later episode, or if you want us to touch more on something we've said before, or something along that line, reach out to us, let us know. Just your words are more than welcomed.
Yeah, well, thanks everyone for streaming this, and we'll see you maybe in a week or so. We'll see you soon. Take care.
So long, everyone.